Do you have a small person in your life that you knit for? If you are a knitter for children from the ages of birth to 12 or 14 or so, then you've come to the right place. Knitting for children is very similar to knitting for adults, except that the size of the child is a moving target and it can be very hard to grasp the sizing, the measuring, those kinds of things that happen, as well as the particular needs and uses that children have that adults may not have in our daily lives. So today I'd like to share with you a few of my thoughts and my best tips and tricks for knitting with children. I have two of my own. They are 4 and 7, and I've knit so many different things for them, some of which worked out, some of which did not. So based on all of this experience, as well as my experience as a knitting pattern designer, I am going to be sharing some of these tips with you today. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Thoughtfully Made Fiber Podcast. My name is Misha and I am a knitting pattern designer and a sewist and a knitter, and sometimes I weave and spin, so kind of a jack of all trades fiber artist living here in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm so excited to be able to share more about my making process with you every other week or so here on this podcast, and thank you for joining me today. Without further ado, let's jump right into my best tips and tricks for knitting for children. The first tip I have might be a little bit obvious, but it's worth saying over and over and over again. Just like knitting for adults, you need to measure the child that you are knitting for. Do not just go into it without measurements. Do not just pick based on their year size. For example, on my most recent test for a children's garment, the Effervescent Mini, which is coming out soon, I had a tester who has a child nearly the same age as mine, but she's wearing 3 sizes down. She knit the same size as me, size 4. However, the sweater is swimming on her kiddo. If you ever shop for kids, you know that this is the most challenging thing about shopping for kids. I recommend that you measure the intended recipient of the garment right when you cast on, not before, not after, and you make sure that you cast on a size that has a little bit of growing room. Because sometimes if you measure exactly to fit, or you select a pattern that has 0 ease, it's very likely that by the time you finish knitting the garment, it will be too small. One growth spurt can change a child's sizing so drastically, so definitely plan for that, but don't overdo it and end up with a size that's like 3 sizes too big. On that note, I want to recommend specifically if you're knitting for babies to minimize the number of knits that you have in the newborn size. I do think it's really nice to knit for newborns, and it's really lovely to have a few things on hand for them, but for the most part, they grow out of it very quickly and you'll get much more use out of that 6-month size. When it comes to knitting for small people, such as children and babies, there are some safety and ease of use concerns. For example, babies under 12 months of age should not be wearing garments that have mohair on them, especially up near the face, and they should not have buttons on the front of their garment if they're going to be wearing them unsupervised at all. I recommend just leaving buttons in the back. All closure should be to the back, and this is because in the ready-to-wear world, buttons are often rated for choking safety or the material safety for children, and for the homemaker, it's incredibly difficult to source buttons that you know for sure are safely certified for children. Everybody's risk assessment for this type of safety issue is different, but many children of that age will chew and gnaw at any button that they can get into their mouth. And if it's anywhere on the front of the garment, it's very likely they're gonna get it into their mouth. And if there's any kind of coating or paint or stain or anything on those buttons, your child's gonna eat that. So I highly recommend to choose patterns for babies under the age of 1 where the buttons are placed towards the back where they cannot reach and is safely out of reach. And as for mohair, I've seen from several sources that mohairs can be an inhalation risk. They'll put it in their mouth and kind of take a breath and now it's in their throat. And while it may not be lethal, it is very uncomfortable to breathe in mohair if you've ever done that before. I certainly have. So this is why the Effervescent Mini, for example, is graded for 2 years and up. It's just because of those safety concerns. So if you're at all in doubt, just watch out for those kinds of things. On the subject of materials, while I'm generally not a huge fan of superwash yarns and garments, I highly recommend that you make everything superwash for babies unless it is your own baby and you know for a fact that you can keep things clean without them ending up in the dryer. I'm gonna try to see if I can find a picture of Mr. Bear, who is our beloved old ragged teddy bear, who is now wearing a sweater that I made for my oldest Kay, who was 4 at the time. She wore this t-shirt one time and then immediately felted it by putting it in the wash. She wanted to be helpful, and it's adorable that she wanted to be helpful, so I'm not mad about it. It's just sad that I spent all those hours making something, and even as a knitting pattern designer, I fell victim to this. I had a child who didn't know how to care for things, and as she's learning these things, learning how to care for her clothes, she made a mistake. That just happens with young children. So young children is kind of where I make an exception, and I make a lot of superwash clothing for my kids. So especially if you're gifting to someone who has a newborn or is expecting a newborn, please, on behalf of all new parents, please, please, please use superwash wool if you can. Or use cotton or acrylic, fibers that are easy care and don't require a lot of thinking, because in those newborn days, we get so tired and so brain foggy, and it's very hard to remember to do things the right way. My next tip is regarding sizing and growing into things. Rather than knitting garments the next size up to have more room to grow into, I recommend that you use the recommended ease. Plus, if you have an extra tall child or a child who grows quickly, to lengthen the sleeves and the body. This will often be enough to buy you an additional 6 months, if not more, out of a piece of garment for a young child. My oldest is about to turn 8, and this has worked really well for us. I only knit for her every other age, so every other year, and usually she can wear these things for at least 2 years. Once they get past age 3 or 4, their sloth really does drastically slow down, so it's okay to kind of, if they're in between ages, to kind of knit that next even age up. So like if they're 7, knit for 8, if they're 8, knit for 9. And then if you have another child or it's being passed down to another a family with another child, you can always fill in the years in between. Like when I had my second child, C, I went and filled in like the odd number. So I was kind of knitting even numbered sizes for K, and then for C, I knit the odd number sizes so that she had like double, because I didn't want her to just have hand-me-downs. I wanted her to have new knits of her own as well. So that's kind of how I plan for those sizes. You don't have to knit for your child every size. Who can keep up? I can't. It's okay to kind of do every other size or just small accessories. On the subject of materials, it might be tempting to do a quick knit out of Aran or bulky weight. Worsted weight things are so cute on kids, and I certainly have quite a few worsted weight knits for my own kids, but don't forget that worsted weight sweaters tend to have trouble fitting into coats. The smaller the circumference of that sleeve and the armhole, the more difficult it is going to be to fit additional material under there. A worsted weight garment is going to have some thickness to it, and it's proportionally a lot more in a child-sized garment than in an adult-sized garment compared to that upper arm measurement. So cramming that sleeve into a winter coat can be very challenging, and if the child who's wearing that garment is not able to cram that sleeve into the winter garment, now this garment is mostly going to be used during spring and during the fall. Some alternatives to this is to knit a vest, which keeps the core warm but allows them to layer it any which way over and under it. Vests are incredibly versatile garments for children, and my kids have worn their vests to death. I've made one each of Kay's back to school vest for each of my kids, and they really love it. They love practicing buttoning with the big buttons on them. Since they're older children, it's great for that motor skill development, and they're able to layer it on and off, which makes it a 3-season garment. They can wear it as outerwear during the spring and fall, and then during the winter, they layer it under winter coats, which helps me get that extra time and extra wear time out of those garments for my kids compared to more bulky, full-on pullovers. My next tip after that is for parents or friends and family of picky children. If you have a picky child in your life who likes to choose all their own things, I highly recommend that you involve this child in decision making. And if I may get on my soapbox for a minute, I really believe that many children don't get the chance to take this kind of agency in their lives, and it can be really, really fun for them to be included in the decision-making and creative process, and it'll result in a garment that they're really excited to wear, and you're gonna see more wear out of those garments as a result. It can be very, very tempting to knit items sight unseen for expectant and new parents particularly, but for sure, if you're knitting for new parents and expectant parents, please do ask them about their preferences, fibers. It might be beneficial to knit something from something like acrylic or cotton rather than wool, in addition to the delicious, lovely wool garments that you plan to knit, just in case the child ends up having any medical issues such as eczema or skin needs, or if they're like my child, they end up in the NICU and they're unable to wear wool garments that cannot be washed on hot for weeks and weeks and weeks. In those cases, cotton and acrylic garments are going to be a little bit more advantageous just because they can be brought into those hospital environments. And it's so meaningful when NICU parents are able to bring these handmade items of love into the incubator, which is pretty unusual. It totally depends also on your local hospital's policies, but I highly recommend just trying to minimize reasons why they don't let you bring the thing to the hospital. Nobody wants to think about these things, but it does happen, so it's really nice to have one or two things, even a hat. Our NICU had an amazing collection of hats that were knitted by volunteers, all acrylic, in a little basket by the unit, and we as parents could go and choose one for our child to take home. And that was so meaningful to me that somebody knit that for my child, and the hospital really went out of its way to go through all the different materials and kind of choose them for what could be sanitized, since those kinds of sanitary practices are so important for newborns. So, and I think not just for neonates, not just for preemie babies, I think it's good to always have at least one or two items like this for any newborn, just in case. And of course, because of the sanitary aspect, it'll also be easy care for the parents as well. My next tip is on what to knit for a young child. I highly recommend that for new walkers and for babies that you skip the socks. If they're newborn babies, they're gonna kick it off. And if they're new walkers, they'll slip slide across the floor and it's not super duper safe. I find that my kids didn't really start walking steadily in socked feet until 2 years of age. I just let my kids run in those grippy socks that you can buy at Target or anywhere else. I try my best to buy all cotton, but the little poly rubber things on the bottom of socks really helped. I'm sure you can find them for hand knit socks, but honestly, just wait. I don't think it's worth knitting socks for really, really young children and toddlers. Especially in the newborn age, they'll kick it off and now you have only one sock and you'll never find the other one. It's gonna be like deeply embedded in a car seat. True story, this happened to me. I highly recommend that you knit things like hats and mittens, as they can be used for a really, really long time, and the sizing is very flexible. Be sure to use a very stretchy cast on, such as the tubular or German twisted cast on for hats and mittens, so that they can last for as long as you can. My kids tend to wear their hats for 3 or even 4 years before they outgrow them, because items with negative ease, when they start out with kind of 0 or slightly positive ease, they can keep growing and growing into them until there's pretty significant negative ease. For items that come in pairs, such as mittens, I highly recommend that you try connecting them with an I-cord. One of my most popular accessory patterns, Clara's Playtime Mittens, does this and tells you how to do it, but you can really apply this concept to any mitten pattern you want. Any mitten that you're knitting for little ones, put a cord on it. I only recommend this for older children, probably 2 or older, because younger children can get kind of entangled in it. So just be careful and ask the parents if you are not the parent. What I do is I have my kids put on the mittens first before their coat. Then after they put on their coat or their sweater, whatever is the outerwear, it is now threaded through the sleeves and the back of that sweater. And that means that when the mitten falls off their hand, it is secured through the sleeves, secured through the back. It will not be lost. And oftentimes my kids will take off their mittens if they're playing and put it in their pocket, and it's still connected through their coat. This really gives them a little bit of leeway to take it off, put it on, do whatever they need to. Kids are active and they're going to use their hands, so I don't think we can expect them to keep mittens together and safe in a similar manner to adults. That I-cord is a game changer, and it's really changed my opinion on knitting mittens for kids. Previously, I was really against knitting mittens for my kids because they get lost, but after this trick, I really think that it makes a difference, and now I think it's really worthwhile knitting mittens for our kids, and I knit them all the time now. And that's all my tips for knitting for kids for today, and I hope that you enjoyed this video and enjoyed chit-chatting about all the ways that we can care for the little kids in our lives and show them lots of love with the beloved craft that we do. Some of my designs, like the sweater I'm wearing now, the slightly sassy V, come about because of customer requests or because of customer needs, what I think that my customers need and want to knit. Some of my designs, like the effervescent pullover for adults, are designed for another entity or sometimes for myself, something I really want to wear. In this case, the effervescent pullover was designed for Pom Pom Quarterly, may it rest in peace, a wonderful magazine that I had the honor of working with. It was on the cover of that magazine, but it's not something I would have designed for my own customers, for example. However, sometimes my designs are not for myself and not really for my customers, even though I love you all. Sometimes I design things that come out of love for my own family and my own kids, and the Effervescent Mini is one of those things. The effervescent pullover came out when my youngest was just 2, and she was a little bit speech delayed, so she wasn't quite talking yet. But as soon as she could talk, she always wanted a ruffle pink sweater. Last fall, she asked me again, "Mama, can I have a pink ruffle sweater just like yours?" And even though this is a very fussy and very whimsical style and very fancy, and even though I'm not sure that anyone else is gonna wanna knit this for their kids, I couldn't tell her no, and that's how the Effervescent Mini came to be. It's a small version of the effervescent pullover, and it has the same beautiful show-stopping yoke with a little mohair ruffle. It starts at age 2, so you don't have to worry about the ruffle for kids under the age of 2. In the grown-up version, the effervescent pullover is quite cropped, and it also has 3/4 length, kind of like just past the elbow sleeves. In the mini version, for practical reasons, because I'm a parent, I lengthened the sleeves to full length. It's a full length tapered sleeve, and the body hem is designed to kind of land at the high hip. This is just because I feel that my own kids will get a lot more wear out of sweaters if they're full length, or at least high hip length, and if they have full sleeves. I think for a grown-up style, kind of transitional garments that are half-sleeved or that are cropped are great, but for little kids, I just want my kids to be able to stay covered and stay warm in all situations. So being like the mom that I am, that's how I've designed the Effervescent Mini. Of course, as always, you're free to modify it to be just like the grown-up version for your kid, but that is what I have done for the Effervescent Mini this time. So the Effervescent Mini is out today, and I highly recommend that you take a look at all my children's patterns. I've put a link in the description box for all my kids' patterns or patterns that come in kid sizes in my catalog, and I hope you'll give them a try. Knitting for kids can be a bit of a trial and error thing due to sizing being a moving target, but I really find it so rewarding to knit for not only my own kids, but for the kids of loved ones in my life. It's a way that I can show them love. It's a way that I can spend time thinking about them. Hours and hours of love and time and stitching goes into that garment, and I think that it's a really meaningful gift to give if you have the time and the means to do so. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you'll give the Effervescent Mini or any of my other children's patterns a try. This has been so fun to put together, and as I'm preparing for spring and the next season in Amy's Your Makes, I have so much exciting news to share with you that's coming up. If you like this video, I really hope that you'll consider liking it, subscribing to see more videos like it, and leaving me a comment to tell me your favorite tips for knitting for kids. Of course, my kids are not grown yet, they're still very small, so I'm always open to more tips as they grow into that preteenish, like older elementary age. I'm sure I have a lot to learn, so if you have any tips, please don't hesitate to leave a comment. And if you have any questions, please also leave a comment as well. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.